actually, the issues that we've been talking about and my fellow panel members are really, really important. And what I want to do is really sort of talk about them in a slightly different way, in a more macro, strategic way, because some of the things that we've been hearing are absolutely fabulous. But I think there's a number of structural issues that we've actually got to get our heads round, because otherwise we're not going to be able to deliver on some of the particular issues that have been raised earlier. So I want to sort of argue that we need a much more multi-pronged response to future skills, which involves government, very importantly, the sector, and by that I mean the clients, the supply chain, higher education, further education, the workforce, the people, and sometimes when we're talking about technology, we forget about it. This is about people, and also professional bodies such as CIHT. I mean, skills shortage and skills shortages has been pretty well documented over the last couple of years, but I think our sector is still coming to terms with what this actually means and what steps need to be taken to address it, and I'm not sure that we're there yet. And the conversation on skills has been made even more urgent by Brexit. Now, I haven't really heard much conversation about Brexit over the last few days, but actually this is quite central, I think, to the skills agenda. According to a report from Arcadis, which was published earlier this year, the UK workforce has increased by 1 million people between 2005 and 2015, and 50% of which is migrant labour. And certainly in the construction and engineering world, that's important because a lot of our labour is non-UK. And the estimates show that over the next few years, we'll need about 69,000 engineers to plug the skills gap. And so the conversation that the government is having around a hard or a soft Brexit is really important to us as an industry, because if we go down a hard Brexit route, the UK construction, including engineering, can miss out on as many as, the estimate is about 214,000 EU workers. So the type of Brexit that the government negotiates will be critical for our sector. One of the things that CIHT has been doing is really lobbying government to make sure that this point is very much at the forefront and that they understand the particular implications on infrastructure delivery. It also takes a geographical context, so the what and the where is also important. And clearly, in terms of migrant labour, London and the South East has about 35% of the workforce are UK nationals. So should we consider also, when we're talking about the skills, a regional response through local authorities, geographical working permits, or devolved authority to councils, mayor authorities elsewhere? And I think a secondary consideration is, beyond the regional and national boundaries, is how do we influence the socio-economic conditions to drive demographic skill changes? So, some of the solutions, well, we've heard some of them already, and I just want to touch on 2 or 3. Training and upskilling. To cope with the uncertainty and disruption that we're experiencing and will continue to experience, we need to focus more on professional development and upskilling. So we will need to be much more agile and lighter on our feet in the way that we recruit. We will need to think about transferable skills in a different way, so the transferable skills between sectors, and think about potentially a skills passport to allow that transferability to operate in a much smoother, effective way. And we're also going to have to think about returners in a way that we haven't done before. We lose a lot of people out of the workforce, and we're very poor at getting them back in. We'll also, I think, be challenged around the traditional preserve of sector specializations, because I think if we only look at it in that way, our ability to respond to market changes will reduce. And certainly as an institution, we see our membership broadening, and I think that's very much a result of a much clearer need for interdisciplinarity in the delivery of highways and transport infrastructure. I think businesses will need to invest more in upskilling and cross-skilling. We have, in much of the supply chain, a survivalist business model with extremely low margins. We're talking about margins of less than 2% and sometimes much, much less than that. And as a consequence, there is less investment in skills. This will need to change. It won't be cheap, but it's essential, I think, in terms of future competitiveness and efficiencies. Talking of efficiencies, our productivity as a sector, we're going to have to look very carefully about that. We've had it well documented in a report by the Pharma Review last year, which basically sort of looked at the construction industry challenges, productivity challenges, and in that, engineering is part of that construction sector. And it shows quite clearly that over the last 10 years, construction and engineering has been essentially flat in terms of productivity, in contrast with other industries, particularly manufacturing, where they've seen a 50% certainly greater growth in terms of output per hour worked over that period. To increase the sector's productivity, we're going to have to look at a number of things, but it will include wasted labour and time across the supply chain. And that, again, requires greater flexibility and transferability of labour between projects and sectors. Wanted to pick up rather nervously, I think, given the last panel speaker, on technology. At a recent roundtable event held by the Royal Academy of Engineering, we heard that predictions are difficult, but across all sectors, predictions are that in 10-year horizon, between 10% and 38% of current jobs across all sectors will be replaced by technology. And we hear forecasts about automation potentially disrupting jobs, with the transport sector likely to be most significantly affected. According to PricewaterhouseCoopers, 56% of jobs in transportation and storage are at risk by 2030 due to developments in robotics and artificial intelligence. Rather than a threat, is automation and technological change the opportunity to really address our skill shortage and refresh the narrative around careers in our industry? But there's a caveat to this. I think certainly our current governance and political thinking hasn't yet been able to create a framework where automation can be a positive contributor to the skills challenge rather than being imposed by disruptors and seen as negative. The role of artificial intelligence is not well understood, and how we equip the workforce with the right skills to embrace technology is, in my view, often muddled and confused. So, two issues seem to demand our attention. Firstly, as a sector, we need to take much more responsibility on this, and we need to engage with creating the framework for decisions on technology and to make sure that we're influencing the direction of travel. We need to deepen, and secondly, we need to deepen our understanding on the effects of technology itself on our sector and the people, and again, I use the word people who work in it. This is certainly something that CIHT is taking forward. And my final point is the challenge around image and culture, and it's been referred to under equality, diversity, and inclusion. We suffer from an image problem. We continue to, yet we've been talking about diversity and inclusion for a number of years. There is a lot of good work out there. I certainly acknowledge that, but actually we need to do more. And we need to do more around beyond the gender issue and certainly around the inclusion issue and the culture change. As we enter a highly uncertain and disruptive period for the sector, And if we are to achieve increased productivity, which I think we will need to, and a fit-for-purpose workforce, we will also need a healthy workforce. So much attention is given quite rightly to matters of workforce physical health and safety, but the mental health of our workforce is just as important. I don't know if any of you have read the Thriving at Work report that came out at the beginning of this month, and it reports that 300,000 people have a long-term mental health problem and they lose their jobs because of that, and that's each year. That means the annual cost to the UK economy of poor mental health is up to £99 billion, of which 42 billion is borne by employers, so borne by some of our employers here on the panel. The number of people forced to stop work as a result of mental health problems was 50% higher than those with physical health conditions. In our sector, we did some research a couple of years ago, and we found that our members, and hence the workforce in the sector, is finding it challenging even to be open about physical disabilities, let alone mental health disability, and is still viewed very much as a taboo subject. And so when we're talking about diversity, equality and inclusion, we need to widen that debate to include the mental health issues as well. And just to put it in perspective on why it's relevant to the skills agenda, the authors of the report, they describe the economic case as overwhelming, and they link current failures of UK relative poor productivity to our lack of engagement on mental health. And an analysis by Deloitte examines existing workplace interventions, identified the potential to generate a return to business of between 1.5 and 9 to every pound spent. So that has to be a business imperative, I think. Certainly, CIHT will be looking with its corporate partners and how we actually take this agenda forward. So, mental health, as well as productivity, as well as retraining, skilling, and the proper investment are absolutely critical business decisions. If we want to attract and retain the workforce that we need, i.e. the people we need, with the skills we need, then we will have to get real over these issues. Thank you.